You're listening to The Practice of a Hoodoo Baptist, my personal journey of root work, faith, and ancestral wisdom. I'm the creator and host, Chelsea Von Chaz. This is where I honor the ones who came before me and share what's been passed down and walk you through my experiences of being unapologetically aligned, covered by spirit, guided by blood. Today, I'm so excited. I can't contain it. I can't hide it. Y'all can see it in my face. Super excited to have a very special guest. Today, I have Dr. Yvonne Chireau. She is a scholar of African American religion and spirituality, recently retired from her role as professor of religion at
Mhm.
Swarthmore College. She is the author of Black Magic, Religion, and the African American Conjuring Tradition, a groundbreaking work, y'all, that illuminates the history of hoodoo, conjure, and root work as vital systems of healing, survival, and resistance. Her research continues to shape how we understand Black spirituality as both sacred practice and cultural power. Miss Lady, how are you? How are you?
Oh, I'm wonderful. I'm wonderful. I'm retired, so I'm really
Yes.
I'm really wonderful.
Okay.
No, but
Let's get
I'll tell
into it. Let's
I
get into it. How's retirement life treating you?
well, it was December, and,
Mhm.
right now it's back to school for everyone, and my spouse is a professor, so everyone's all busy, and I'm
Mm.
kicking back, and
And you're chilling.
I'm chilling, and I thought I would feel after 31 years of teaching that sort of pain. It's not. I mean, I'm still attached to the college. I'm working on
Right,
some
right.
projects, but not being in the classroom, one of the beautiful things about teaching, whether you're at a college or I mean any kind of teaching, is you're sort of shepherding the young.
Mhm,
And every year, and you've probably experienced this, every year you see they're kids, but they don't want you to say they're kids.
mhm,
But every year as time goes by, you see how young the youth are. I thought I would miss that. Don't miss that. I
mm,
actually feel like I'm at a place where I wanna speak to the older folk, the ones who
mm,
not older, but,
mhm.
people who have a little bit more life. So it's been wonderful. I'm working on my other projects, and, I'm really enjoying it. I really am.
Amazing. I'm happy for you. Congratulations. 30 you said 30 years? 31 years?
31
At
years
at
I've
the
been
same
here.
college, right? The whole
Yes.
time?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah,
Wow,
yeah,
wow.
yeah.
Looking back on your experience and your career at the college, is there anything that you hope your students carry forward that they may have, grabbed from being a student with one of your courses?
Yeah, and that's the beautiful thing. After doing this for so long, students grow up, they move away, and then they
Mhm.
become your Facebook friends. And then they'll say the most wonderful things that they didn't say when they were in the classroom.
Okay, okay,
So
yeah.
it's hard to convey that. So when you're in college, I mean, it's the world is
Mhm,
just open, everything is just there. And so I see my role, and again, I think the role of all teachers is to sort of smooth the way.
mhm.
It's an exciting time. But I don't, I'm surprised when people get back in touch with me and they say, that was the best class I ever had. I was like, yeah, but you got a C. So so I mean, but that's gratifying. That kind of
Yes.
makes it all worth something.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's really been a beautiful journey.
Did any of your students, like, say anything to you, like, even after, you were already by the time Sinners came out, you already left. So
No,
did any uh,
no, no,
oh,
no,
wait,
no,
because
no.
you started you s did you s you started working on
Yeah.
the film years ago. I was a
Yeah.
wardrobe stylist, so I understand, like,
Yep.
that was years in the making, I understand.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but
yeah,
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 like, did
yeah.
any of them, like, trip out or say, "Oh my god, like, this is so cool," or
Oh gosh, yes, I became a celebrity. I got all these I mean, people were asking they liked me in that moment, and yeah,
Oh,
that
mhm,
was nice. I
mhm.
felt like that gave me a little bit of standing because again,
Okay.
I've been there for so long. I'm an old timer, so I was cool, suddenly cool. But,
Mm,
and this ties into this work, right? So
mhm,
I wrote about hoodoo at a time when it was definitely not cool. It
mm,
was actually my dissertation and I was in a religion program. And so I've always loved Black history. I've always wanted to study African American history. But I wanted to do that as a religionist. Back then, it wasn't cool. It was like,
Right.
well, it was like, what do you wanna do? And so it's such a beautiful thing that these things have a and I stuck to it. I was like, "No, I'm
Mhm.
gonna write about this. I don't care." And so to me, it's sort of there's a statement there. I've always been interested in this. The work with Kugler on Sinners, I think it was a high point for me. It was interesting for me, and
Mhm.
having been in this field. But these themes that he's talking about, they're
Mhm.
not new, Chelsea. They're not.
Right.
They're not. They're being packaged or told. These are stories that are being told perhaps in a new way. I actually don't think it's that new. Nothing's new.
Mhm.
So the fact that this is cool or fashionable or people are talking more about it, or that story of Sinners is sort of like an opening to talk about these other things that I really
Mhm.
like. That was a surprise, and that made me really happy because it's given me a lot more faith in the power of popular culture
Mhm.
instead of being as superficial as it tends to be. Um, Not so much popular culture, and this is what I guess we could talk about, the power of
Yes.
storytelling,
Yes,
so yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, as someone who, well, I watched a film so many times, I've lost count. And I thought it was so refreshing because to me, it's not even a horror film.
yeah,
And it's a really beautiful film, and it was so refreshing to see the tradition hoodoo conjure be represented in such a light because with Hollywood, with so many from films to even TV series,
yeah,
it's always represented as demonic, negative, dark,
yeah,
bad. Um, just stay away from it, or the opposite of Christianity, or it's just always the same thing. So after so many years, um, and some of my favorite movies are movies like Eve's Bayou,
yeah,
Daughters of the Dust,
absolutely.
and it's like I can place Sinners kind of in alignment with that because there's this great representation of the tradition of our culture, Southern culture. I'm from Alabama.
Okay.
Southern culture. um and yeah, and also like the work of our ancestors and what it looks like when it's passed down, and for it not to be seen as evil.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And the horror thing, and this is actually a big debate among scholars and cultural critics because
Hmm.
they want to claim it as horror. Now, I was born in the 1960s. I still am a very tender little girl. I do not like horror movies, and I did
Yeah.
an interview. I only did a couple of interviews about this because when
Mhm.
this film was being made, it was very under wraps. And I said to Ryan Coogler, I said, I don't like horror. I'm gonna listen to you, but I said, sell me on
Mm.
this thing. And
Mhm.
he's I'll never forget this. He said, "Oh, professor, you're gonna like this." And I was very skeptical because to me, I just never liked horror. But
Mhm.
I see that there's a point here that my friends are making, the people who write in critical studies about horror or people who even write about the Black experience.
Mhm.
There's a claim to be made that aspects of our experience in this country, our sojourn in this country, are horror. I mean,
Mhm.
there's no way around it. They're monstrous. The terror, the
Yeah.
blood, so there's an argument to be made that horror is an allegory for thinking
Uh,
about Black life.
yeah.
I sometimes feel that that's a very pessimistic way to think about it. And one way I try to get at this is say, well, how do religious folk, how do Black Christians understand? Not just Christians. I mean, because I'm interested in Black Muslims. I don't care. I don't as
Mhm.
long as you're
Mhm.
Black and you have religion. But how do they understand the experience here in America? Is it an experience of horror, terror, and these other things?
Yeah.
And what you find in the Christian tradition is that there's a little bit of that, but as part of that, not only is it is there horror, but there's this story of overcoming. There's this story of faith and power that goes with it.
Mhm.
So all this to say, sometimes I think, especially now in 2025, people love their horror. They love to, and I love. I don't love horror. I will just say
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
I've seen the movie once. Actually, I saw the rushes when they were working on it and editing
Mhm.
it, and I had to sit there like this because I was nervous, and
Aw.
then I couldn't get any of my family to go with me because they I know it's very ironic. I said, "Oh, come go with me because you'll see my name up there," and they're like, "Nope, we don't like horror."
Mm.
But I do understand how why Warner Brothers and why it was marketed that way and why this is the good thing. It is opening up some conversations to those who would
Absolutely.
never go to would never go see a horror movie. So that's you know, I didn't expect that. I didn't expect
Mhm.
that. But and I'll just say this, it was an absolute privilege to work with and I don't usually say this about students. Ryan and Zinzi Kugler, they co-created this project. But as you know, all films are co-creations. But their
Mhm.
vision, I'm very always happy because I've done film stuff before to work with people who are serious about their vision.
Right.
But working with the actress Wumi Musaku was really wonderful because she's a young mother she
Mhm.
is a child of the diaspora. She's, of Nigerian descent. So, it was just a wonderful, unusual experience because
Mm.
think of all the convergences that are going on here. So I
Yes.
felt like I was really, really very, fortunate, to be part of that.
Absolutely. I enjoyed it. My mother I took my mother.
You took your
My
mother. Oh
I
my
took my mother. I went to see it by myself first because I had
yeah.
to vibe
Yeah.
check
Yeah.
because my mother surprisingly, my mother, is into horror films, and
Oh,
it's
wow.
really funny because she is a devout Baptist woman from Alabama,
Yeah.
but also a granddaughter of a conjure woman because on that side of the family we
Yes.
have a lineage of hoodoo practitioners. So yeah, my mother has a really cool duality,
Yes.
going on balance.
That's
So, but
great.
yeah, I took her and she loved it. And and I actually told her I was speaking with you today, and I was like, "Ma, like I want to share like why do you love the movie so much?" And she was like, "The first thing is it took me back to when I was a kid growing up with my grandmother and her being in her garden, her being at the house. Not everybody could come to our house. She was very strict about who was allowed to come inside and who wasn't. She was a God-loving woman, a believer who also was tapped into hoodoo, who also took care of her community. Some people didn't like her. She did not like a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
She said she saw her grandmother through the character Annie. However,
Oh, beautiful.
uh, she looked like Mary. And she was like, "Yeah, because, there's, mixing Creole, a lot of things going on," but she lived her life as a Black woman,
Mm,
and she knew the importance of that, and she did not allow white people. My mother said she barely saw white people
yeah.
growing up, even in Alabama. However, she does remember being in public with her grandmother and seeing white-only signs,
Yep.
colored-only signs, and, and she said, "Yeah, it also makes me feel a little sad." She shared that the movie was beautiful, she loved it, she's like, but it also reminded her that she wished she asked more questions or she doesn't know enough. She feels like she doesn't know enough about the
Yeah.
recipes, the
Yeah.
root work, the, so many things that could have been passed down because she said they
Yeah.
were never sick as
Yeah.
kids. They were
Yep.
never sick. They never went to the hospital. She said the only time I went to the hospital was probably when I found out I was pregnant
Yeah. Yeah.
with you and now it's 23.
Yeah.
But if for a bruise, a scrape, a cold, whatever, if any of them got sick, there was something that grandmama did may she rest,
Oh, mama
great-grandmama
dear,
dear.
mama dear,
It was
yeah,
something that she knew what she could do in making her home concoctions, salves, you name it. She said she made her own hooch, she made her own everything. So
yeah,
she was
yeah,
like, "Yeah." My mother was like, "Yeah, it made me a little sad because I wish I knew I could carry on those things, especially today,
yeah, yeah.
especially today."
Yeah, what
So
how beautiful, how beautiful. I mean, that just that affirms to me not only that, I mean, because you're really talking about a living history, right?
mhm,
How
mhm,
many of us have these stories of our mothers, our grandmothers, right?
mhm,
And I you might see behind me, I keep it. I wouldn't call it an altar. I think everyone has a spot where they have their grandparents or their departed
mhm,
ones. Um, Only now I think the young people are saying, "Well, that's an altar." I was like, "Well, you could call it an altar. You could call it just that's the place where you go and you talk to
mhm,
your family." At some point, this was part of our tradition, even the earliest days of slavery, even though we don't have proof. It's very hard to get a hold of this ancestral remembrance. At some point, it became confused, and that's something that I see that Black Christians in particular have to
mm,
recover. Um, the idea that this is some African voodoo, some African ancestor
yeah,
worship. And these were the labels, of course, that anthropologists or Europeans who colonized Africa put on these
mhm,
traditions of reverence. And I think that was a real turnoff for Black Christians at a certain point, although a lot of Black Christians, even though and this has even happened in slavery, the preacher was saying, "Don't do that. That's what the Africans
mhm,
do."
mhm,
They would do it anyway. So we have lots of stories of people just going to the grave and just,
yeah,
you know and so at some point, that was, sort of repressed. I see that there's a potential, and I'm a sliver right now of opportunity for us to recover that, but it has
mhm,
to come through the Black churches. And the reason I say this is, and you probably know this better than me, a lot of young people, and I'm really concerned with the women. I mean, our
mhm,
brothers are fine, but the women are the carriers of culture. The women are the ones who will bring it to their families eventually. A lot of young women are leaving the churches, and they're leaving the churches for various reasons. Sometimes it doesn't speak to them. Sometimes they join, diasporic religions or something else.
mhm,
But there's also a deep disappointment too. I mean, so there's lots of factors.
mhm,
This is
yeah,
this is to me, and again, I'm not speaking as a church member, but things like this is an easy fix. The idea that in order to understand ourselves as a people, we have to look to the ancestors. We have to look to those who have come before us and respect and honor them. Um, I try to when I teach about this, I have to be careful because you can see the eyes getting wider. And
mhm,
I'll say this to white students and Black students:
mhm,
white people revere their ancestors. We wouldn't be talking about founding fathers all the time if they didn't revere their ancestors of the state. But and my Asian students, they're like, "Yeah, we have a little it's in our family." But for African people, and this was the the wound of the Middle
mhm,
Passage, because there's hard to this connection that is almost impossible to make, that you can't locate your ancestors 7 generations past like most African people could do, 7 generations, because of the
right,
break. I think that wound has caused something in the psyche that, "Oh, well, we'll just have to make it up." Yeah. You might just have to make it up. You might just have to say those ancestors that from Africa who I don't know about, those yeah, and put them up there on their altar or your pictures. So I don't think this is spooky. I think that sometimes religions make them spooky. I think there's a little racism there too that,
mhm,
says, "Oh, we don't wanna be like those African, primitive religions," or whatever. There's a lot of stuff like that. But such a simple thing, remembering grandmother,
Yes.
remembering great-grandmother, remembering and okay, grandfather papa's in there too, but it's so important because women are the ones who are carrying the culture, and I shouldn't say more important, but in terms of the spiritual lineage, because women also bring the children into that
Oh.
cycle, I would say I go with the women, but, the men, the brothers, they're okay too.
Absolutely, yes. No, we love them, and
We
we
love them.
know we we understand. We love them. We know they're there. I love everything that you said, and I agree because I even myself, I've witnessed and experienced a little bit of the internalized racism when it
Yeah.
comes to attending attending church because even like I said, like my folks are still believe in God, still love God. Had a church, but also had a boundary
Yeah.
because we just knew how some folks are, because I grew up even as a child, I grew up going to church, and the church that we went to in Alabama, they are some speaking in tongues, ring shouting, wearing
Mhm.
white on certain Sundays. Everybody wear white, not just the
Mhm.
ushers
Mhm.
and the
Mhm.
the entire congregation wearing white. River baptisms. I remember my baptism in the
Yeah.
pool and my grandmother telling me about her river baptism. And I also remember like traveling, moving to California or moving across the country as a teenager and witnessing how even some other Black churches talk negatively about the
Yeah.
type of church that we went to growing up.
Yeah.
As
Yep.
if like you don't want to be like those Negroes or you don't want to be like those like field
Yeah.
plantation types or
Yeah.
and and I and that really made me think deeper about the power of what my folks were doing and the way and how we were holding on to things because I never saw it as a negative of holding on to our traditions. I never saw it as a negative as far as anything about my church experience. I actually am a person who I didn't necessarily um leave the church because something happened to me. It's just that the traditions and moving out of California, there's just nothing like that experience. And I
Yeah.
just always felt my own internal spirituality was good. It's about my
Mhm.
relationship anyway.
Yes.
But the
Absolutely.
community part is what I do miss,
Yeah.
and it's also the part where I learned to set a boundary because even as a kid, I was told to not tell everybody about our gifts,
Yeah.
to not tell everybody about great grandmother and what she did or grandmother what she did. Like because some people just would not understand.
Yeah.
And there was still a rule of like some people can't come to the house because they might get
Yep.
spooked because there is an altar there
Yep.
with,
Yep. Yep. Yep.
our folks on it. So yeah, so it's really validating to hear you say that because I think even today I'm still dealing with this, but even like in digital, because it's caused
Oh,
even when the movie
yeah.
came out. Oh, it's
Oh, yeah.
so much was
Yeah.
on the internet with folks feeling the need to tear down folks who practice an ATR or
Yeah.
African derived religion or anything that's not necessarily
Yeah.
Christianity or American Christianity. I don't know. I don't know if you
Yeah.
can kind of speak on that a little bit more, but it
Yeah.
is as someone that's experiencing that now, and I
Yeah.
feel the need to be honest, I do feel the need to defend my ancestors because it's been a beautiful experience continuing to have a relationship with them and carrying on these traditions, but I do feel drained.
Yes. I get it. I
I
absolutely
do
get it.
feel drained,
I
yeah.
get it. I get it. I recall when I was growing up, and as a scholar, I was a scholar of religion when I was a baby, but
Oh,
I
okay.
was in the AME church. I was in the Baptist church. I was
Ugh,
baptized as a Catholic, and I think back to those. And I mean, wasn't even a teenager, and how I
mm,
was absorbing all of that, all of and watching and watching and watching. There's something to be said for our traditions. There's something to be said for our shared traditions. But in religion, what I see is, and this is the only thing I can speak of because I'm not a member of a church now. I'm more
Mhm.
like a, and I love it all. I mean, I could sit in any church. Um, that we focus on the small things, and that's normal. All communities do that. So we bicker over, oh, you can't wear white, or you can't sprinkle, or you can't eat this, and and that sort of thing. And that's there's a saying that denominations, whether they're black or white, multiply by dividing. So you go off when you find a group of people who are going to do that, and that's the story of religion, whether it's black and white. I sometimes feel that we're at a crisis point. Um, and then other days I feel perfectly fine. That if we don't get beyond that and have some sort of unified,
Yeah.
spirit spiritually,
Yeah.
whether you're Christian, whether you're not Christian, but a black spirituality, it's just going to continue in this fragmented way. I don't know what the ministers are doing because, I trained with a lot of ministers. I
Mhm.
don't really know. I know that sometimes our conversations go all the way around to, well, what do you feel about queer people in the church? I'm not minimizing these things. I'm just saying that we really are at a crisis point, and I think
Yeah.
most people can feel it or see that. Um, that when we get on these digressions, it's just very strange to me. But I will
Mm.
say this about hoodoo, and that's what's been so interesting to me, how you talk about the digital age. And I remember years ago, my students are like, "Professor, have you been on TikTok or Hoodoo Talk?" And I was like, "What's that?" I mean, this was I didn't know what that I still don't, and this sort of recovery of, or an attempt to recover these
Mhm.
traditions and to sort of remake and reinterpret them. That has been sort of not unexpected because it actually already happened in the 20th century toward the end of the
Mhm.
century. But in this sort of this new format, whatever we call this digital environment, that's been really interesting to see how even within this wonderful world, which this space for everyone, we're still fighting about the same. Oh, you
Yeah.
can't do, and oh, that's not, and I'm like, and sometimes they call me, and I'm like, I can't help you. I can tell you about the 19th century because again, I feel like it's going around and it's going around and around. So I'm not dismissing it, but this is the time, and actually this is the space in which these conversations can occur, as you saw with this film, which touched people
Mhm.
from all over the place. So, so I don't, I kind of lost my point, but I think I'm saying that the infighting, the bickering, the marginalizing of, you know, I like to call it hoodoo spirituality. That's what
Mhm.
I call it that. It's not official. That happened from the beginning, and that I can speak to because that is part of the nature of these sorts of spiritual practices. They don't fit within a system. So, and
Mhm.
what I mean by that, and it's very African, in
Yes.
a way, because the African spiritual leader was always a weirdo. Or we
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes people had they were anomalous. The word we like to use is anomalous. They had something special that was frightening and powerful about them. So, of course, the conjure woman in all of our traditions, she's not going to be at the center of the community. She's going to be right at the edge. Sometimes she's going to be way at the edge, but she's always going to be there. So, and that makes that to me, that makes sense, but it's also what they call a liminal space. It's very dangerous and very powerful because that's the person that you go after first because that's the one who's like that's like the guardian. Um,
Mhm.
I these are things that I think are just we just have to accept them.
Yes.
We don't get scared about it, and it's as you said, someone very wise, told me years ago when I first started this. I was like, "Well, where do I find these conjure women?" And she looked at me, she's like, "You find mother so and so in the church." And then I
Yes.
realized, I said, "Well, they're not gonna use the academic word, and they're certainly not gonna use voodoo or hoodoo to describe what they're doing." And that was an eye opener. So maybe when we talk about it even though we're proud of the tradition, y y we don't use certain ways to say it. I don't have an idea of how to do that, but if Ryan
Mhm.
Coogler can do it and
Yeah.
call Annie a contra woman, I mean, I think we can. So it's an interesting space that we're in now.
Absolutely. It is. I think it's a beautiful space too because there
Yeah.
are so many of us that are waking up. There are
Yeah.
so many of us that are reconnecting and not feeling shame anymore about having relationships with our ancestors or even just doing
Yeah.
the research, letting the curiosity just naturally pull you into learning more about it. Because I have noticed though, I do see a lot of folks online wanting to learn about conjure, root work, hoodoo, and, like, does anybody teach? Does anybody teach? Does anybody teach?
Yeah.
I see that a lot,
Yeah.
and this is when I take the beautiful opportunity of dropping your book in the chat, like, "Hey,
Yeah.
read," do
Yeah.
some research, and
Yeah.
also look within
Yeah.
your family because I that's my truth, the only answer for me as far as just looking into your family, yeah, because the
Yeah.
conjure woman, the root worker was in the church, is still in the church.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
so
Yep.
I do
Yep.
think
Yep.
this is beautiful. How in doing this work and this research for this long, like, how has this shaped your own spirituality?
Oh boy, that's such a good question. Well, as I said, I was in, and I wasn't a dilettante, but I just loved to experience religions. And my
Mhm,
parents, they took us to church. My father was from, the French, West Indies, and all of them are Catholic, but they're also something else, right? But they're all so I went to Catholic school for, like, a year or so, and then my mother, was just like me, very a free thinker, but they love being in community with Black folk. They loved it because my family moved around, and sometimes we were, like, the only Black folk around, so they love to go to the church. Um, I once you begin to study it, and I think this is true for anyone who decides to do the academic study of religion, you have to come to terms with that's where you really do have a crisis of faith. Like, well, am I studying this as an object, or is this something that
mhm,
I believe? And so, if anyone who's a scholar of religion tells you that they don't go through that, I don't I'm not gonna say they're lying, but you have to. You have to, well, what does this mean to me? So for me, the first thing, as I said, when I began to look at religion in this larger context, I said there are stories of Black people that are not only being not told, but they're taking them and they're twisting them. So, and that happened early on. It happened during slavery. And so I keep talking about this, and I think I said it earlier, storytelling, storytelling,
mhm.
storytelling. Who owns the story? So for me, to answer your question, because I'm rambling, I had to decide who owned my story of my journey. And I really understand myself as a soul. I am a soul,
Mm,
which sounds like well, yeah, of course you're a soul. Think about it. I am a soul. I am, and you are a soul, but I know I'm a soul. Coming to terms with that in
mhm,
relation to all the stuff that I read and understanding that all these folk who lived and suffered and died and practiced magic and
mhm,
religion were also souls. And the soul is bigger than we can even think of. This, this divine being that's on this journey that comes around and around. And I'm not going to talk about reincarnation or whatever they say. No,
mhm,
the soul is even bigger than that. So the research enriched my soul journey. And I my style in studying this was to get as close to the sources as possible. And again, it's gonna sound like I'm a dilettante, but I'm not gonna say that. I joined up a lot, I followed a lot, I've had many teachers, but it was always, not just as a scholar, but to enrich myself as a soul. Um, and I will say this, I'll say this boldly. People don't like it when you say this. People in religious studies don't like it when you say this. I don't think you can do this work unless you have God.
Mm.
And I'm not saying,
Wow.
and a number of people right now are like, "Oh, she said the G word." We're not even supposed to say that in the academic field. But when I say God, everyone has a different image. Some people say, well, that's Jesus. Some people are going to say that's Olorun. No, I just said God. I really don't think you can do this work, or you can do it, but it will not be authentic because you won't know what you're talking about. So, and
Mhm.
I'll just leave that there. I'm not saying I'm better or
Yeah.
but I do
Right.
think that having that gives you an insight into what every single person that came before. So that I'm not preaching. I'm not saying you have to believe it a certain way, but I don't find that to be an outrageous statement. But in this field of religion, I guarantee you, people are like, she said that. It's like,
Well, okay, first of all, you're not ranting, you're not preaching, but if you feel moved to, go ahead. Go ahead. Whatever, let them use you, okay?
okay.
But I love what you said, and yeah, 'cause I've never heard that before. I didn't know that that was, I guess that was like this rule that you had in
Yeah,
in academia, like, where you can't necessarily, like, center point or mention God or just say, "Hey, you can't." It may be impossible to really truly do this work and be authentic
yeah,
and let it move you if you don't have God. Like, I've never heard that. I didn't know
yeah.
that that was kind of this, like, I guess, hush hush thing or just this rule that you had where you just had to be, like, just solid,
Well, I
like,
mean,
just not.
it's unspoken. I mean,
Mhm.
think about the discourse, the political discourse. If the teacher wants to mention God or the Bible, it's like, it's is it
Mhm,
legal or not? So
mhm.
so it's almost this reaction to that. But more so in religious studies, and this is kind of important because people when my when my mother and father found out I was going to go to grad school, they're like, "Are you going to be a preacher?" And I was like, "No, mom, that's theology." That's theology, and they were like, "Oh, okay." And then and then wait. My sister became a physician, and they said, "Well, she's a real doctor." But I no, it's fine, it's family stuff. But the
Oh,
point
okay.
was that if you
Ooh.
study religion, traditionally, for Black
Mhm.
folk in particular, going into the
You're gonna be
ministry
a
was
pastor.
and it
Mhm.
was very prestigious and respected. I was like, "No, I'm not doing that. I'm studying religion, which is comparative. It's not just Christianity, it's all of
Right.
them." But that field itself, in order to sort of distinguish itself from theology and Christianity, they took on the trappings of science. They're like, "Oh,
Yeah.
we are scientifically studying religion," and go into all these contortions about, you know and I'm like, "Look, y'all, I believe in God, deal with it." I didn't say that back then. I was really I was but it's I understand
Yeah,
why they
yeah.
do it, but I've come to the place where I don't think you can do this authentically because you're always outside of people's experience. People believe in God, they believe in spirits, they believe in all kinds of things. If you stand outside of it, and if you don't it's like cooking, you'll get that, right? "Oh, I know how to make a cake, but I've never tasted a cake before." And you can make the best cake in the
Mhm.
world, but you've never ever tasted that cake. It might be great. Your cake might be great. So it's that tasting.
Mhm.
And for me, I just took it a step further.
Yeah.
Black religions with an S, black churches, various religions, da 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 da, da. And that's what I wrote my dissertation, which became the Black
Mhm.
Magic book on this idea of magic. Don't
Yeah.
even get started with magic. Why did they call I mean, when the Holy Ghost comes and people are jumping around and taken by the
Mhm.
Spirit, why did they call that magic? Or worse, you know this, Chelsea. Why did they
Mhm.
call that, demons and stuff? So I came into it questioning the categories, knowing
Mm.
that there was something more than, what these
Yeah.
scientists are saying. The only thing that's real is what you can see, very materialistic. So Anyway,
Yeah.
I did ramble. I am sorry, I'm rambling. I enjoy you
No,
can tell I enjoy talking about this.
yeah, but I love it, and it feels good to have someone else that I can talk about this
Oh,
with,
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm seriously, like, so much of this the reason why I even have this podcast is because even as a kid, there's just so much that has been built up, just me wanting to ask questions and talk about this openly,
Yes.
and it's
Yeah.
because it's been silenced, and I truly believe that I am venerating my folks through talking about this because they may not have been able to have this a way to
Right.
just openly talk about it. And I do enjoy it too. So please, again, you're not rambling. I love a good rant. So it's okay. So I do have a couple of quick questions because I do want you to uh, speak on uh, therapeutic pluralism
Oh,
and
yeah.
and and another book that I always drop for people to get into because yeah, a lot of folks are really hungry for more information about hoodoo in particular, and everybody wants, teaching. And I'm not sure if it's more so folks going into like the capitalist or commodified,
Mhm.
or just wanting to know how to do spells and things.
Yeah.
Or if it's just, hey, I want to learn more because to have a better relationship with my ancestors, to tap into genealogy or whatever. But
Yeah.
I do always drop the late Albert Rabuteau, his name,
Oh,
because
yes.
I think he
Yes.
profoundly shaped the study
Yeah.
of African American religion. Um, if you
Yeah.
can talk about that as far as the influence
Yeah.
his influence on your work
Yeah.
and his legacy and yeah, just kind of educate for folks who may not know about therapeutic pluralism because I
Yeah.
for me, I really that's a huge component for me as far as wanting to know how did my 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th great grands
Yeah.
deal with any type of harm or violence or ailments or just all the things. How did they do it
Yeah.
without the internet?
Yeah, yeah. I
The
know.
iPhones and,
Oh my gosh.
technology,
Yeah.
or did they have technology? Like, these are things
Yeah.
I wanna know. So, if you
Yeah.
don't mind kind of talking about his
I
work.
love that. I'll deal with the latter question first. Yeah,
Sure.
I mean, did they have technology? They had technology, but we might not even understand it. I mean, they talk about and one of the first things that the slave owners did, not the first, but by the 1800s, they outlawed the use of the drum. This happened all over the diaspora, by the way.
Mhm.
They outlawed the use of the drum in Cuba or Brazil, and, those black folk there, they weren't having it. But the drum was a technology of communication.
Yeah.
So they somehow these colonizing slaveholders knew it, so they said, you're not gonna have a drum." And yet they let the black folk, use the strings, the banjo, like we saw in
Mhm.
that film. So that to me is so interesting when you say technologies of communication in particular. That was one of the first things they cut out because somehow
Yeah.
they knew, and they knew because people had already been in Africa and they saw how the
Right.
drum was used. So that when you said that, I was like, yeah, they had technology, but sometimes they had to sneak around. For black folk, because they couldn't use the drum, they used their feet. And so in ritual
Mhm.
spaces, the foot is the dance is the way that the drumming
Mhm.
communicates. So I found that fascinating when I actually saw it on the ground. And I had to learn that from a white scholar. But so the second part of your question was about the therapeutic pluralism. Just to say, I got that word from Albert Rabbitoe, and it's basically a fancy way of talking about healing. And so how so much of Black religion, I would say religion itself, but let's just Black religion is oriented toward
Yeah.
healing. And when I say this, healing is not just the physical body. And we really have the language to talk about this now. But
Right.
healing might be the social body, the community. So healing as and the ways that religion offers therapeutic practices, whether they're ritual practices, whether they're practices of reading, so that's what that idea of therapeutic pluralism is getting at, and how I think that Black religions they are a very rich terrain for looking at the pluralism. We never just do things one way, and that's because we've had to be pragmatic. So in the religious space, we will incorporate, laying on hands, but we
Mhm.
might do some root work too, and for the physical healing. We might do praying, you know, to Christ and the Holy Spirit. But we might also call upon the ancestral to do so. So it's very pluralistic, and sometimes anything goes, because in the situation of slavery, of course, anything had to go. It had to work.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
had to work, or else
Mhm.
so that's the bit about, and that's a good segue to Rabbitoe, because he focused on slavery, and I
Mhm.
just lit up and I met him by accident. I was messing around. I wasn't thinking about grad school. I was living in I mean, I wasn't. I had just finished a degree program, and I met him, and I said, "Wow." And I was still I've always been a believer, and I was amazed at how religion, in so many conversations about Black folk, just got
Mhm.
pushed out. It's like,
Mm.
or if you talk about religion, you're gonna talk about the Christians. So I'm like, "Oh, because I know, my boyfriend's in the Nation of Islam. I know there's other things than Christianity." So Rabbitoe was the first person that I met who said, "Well, if we're gonna talk about religion and slavery," which is something I
Mm.
was interested in, we can't just talk about Christianity. Christianity is really important, but let's
Yes.
talk about the African
Yeah.
sources. And let's talk about, this that's where the pluralism begins. So I met him and I was like, "I wanna go to school and study with you." I was such a fangirl, but he's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful person. And they took me in, and I happened to be, again, the soul guided me to a PhD program in which there were nothing but Black students. There are a couple of white students, but Black students who wanted to build upon
Mhm.
this professor's work. Again, I didn't know anything. I was like, I just want to study. And my parents, God bless them, they said, "You go, honey. We don't care if you don't have a job. Just keep reading those books." God bless them, right? So his argument was, just in a nutshell, for first of all, no one else was talking about Black people.
Mhm.
Again, we're always like the last, it's like, "Oh, okay, Black people." But he said, not only is African American religion and the history of African American religion, in this country at least, important, but it reaches back before we got here. So he's actually tying us to an African source, which is very controversial for a number of reasons at the time. This would have been, he wrote his book in the late 70s, right?
Mhm.
So he also said, and this I think was the thing that turned all of us on, that if you look at slavery and religion, and of course, slaves always have religion, right? It's a good question, though, if we think about slaves during the Roman period or during whatever period we're talking about, because slavery is universal. What is the religion of slaves? Are they just sitting there hoping for freedom? He said there's something very interesting about African American slave religion, and he called it, and this is the subtitle of his book, "An Invisible Institution,"
Mhm.
because most of what went on with American slavery was outside of the eyes of the white people of the slaveholder. I would even go so far as to say it was underground. All right.
Mhm.
And we're talking about things that we're familiar with now, but no one knew about this. The hush arbor, a religion in the woods where people, enslaved people would gather under the trees. The ring shout started with this invisible institution.
Mhm.
So it's invisible because the people looking at it are like, "What is that kind of savage stuff going on?"
Yeah.
And this is important too, and he's the only person who makes this point. It's pre-Christian, because we do know, and I love these arguments on Facebook, because people say, "Well, Christianity's from Africa and the Bible's from Africa." And I'm like, you go, girl, because the enslaved people were not exposed to Christianity at an early point. And I'm talking about the 1700s, which is why it's really important, Chelsea, that people, when they talk about slavery, say when they're talking about. Most people just jump to the part where right before the Civil War.
Yeah, yeah.
So in the
Mhm.
1700s, so the question is, were Black folk uh, exposed to Christianity? And then you get
Yeah,
into these conversations of they were forced to be baptized, da 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 da. Da.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
these are actually easy questions to answer, but they've become really. I'm sorry that the sound is.
It's okay.
There's a sound in the background.
Okay.
Really charged politically. I hear this all the time, which is why I don't go on Facebook so much, except to post pictures of kittens.
Yeah,
Black
yeah.
folk were forced to become
Mhm.
Christians. Rabbitoh, because he was a wonderful scholar, answered all these questions for us. You know, Black folk didn't want to be Christian, they wanted to be African. So every question that we now are wrestling with in
Mhm.
that book, Slave Religion, he points us
Yeah.
to the answer. And I and a lot of people aren't even familiar with that book. Professor Rabbitoh passed away. Wow, I would say maybe 13 years ago, maybe longer. It is a classic book. Now it's
Yes.
not something you sit down and read. It's a dense book. But his contribution was to open up Black American religion to all the questions and to show it as something complex. All right. It hadn't been done. So nowadays, yeah, there's oh boy, so many people can trace their intellectual lineage back to Albert Rabbitoh, and
Oh,
I
yes.
feel honored. I feel so honored to have worked with him.
That's amazing. It is a classic book in my household. It is
Oh,
something that I always bring up next to black magic, to be honest,
oh
because
my
I do
gosh.
think it's something for anyone that really wants to understand or just to have a better understanding or just to open their mind. Folks with questions. And I always say, you just have to read, y'all. You have to do the research and dive into the folks that what did they do
Yeah,
way beyond. Like,
yeah,
that's where the answer is, I think. And
yeah.
yeah, and I was just always taught, like, in order to know your future, you have to know your past, and it's okay to actually
That's true. It's true.
dive into the history. And I'm gonna get ready to let you go, but I did want to ask about something that I do see coming up quite often about hoodoo being a closed practice,
Yeah.
or if it being reclaimed and closed for us, as in folks with ancestors who practice, versus like, hey, is it truly for everybody? So I did want you
Yeah.
to talk about that, because
Yeah.
yeah, those are the types of arguments I do see often. And I'm a bit indifferent, I will say, as someone who grew up with a family where it was kind of this silent thing, but we were still practicing, still doing our thing. And even also, I did grow up even with one of my other grandmothers where it she didn't really say hoodoo. They
Mhm.
didn't really have the language or just to say these things. They just did it. Um, and so when people are like, "Oh, well, it's closed and it's for everybody," I'm like, "Oh, I'm indifferent," because I do want us to consider indigenous folks, because
Mhm.
my father's side, Muskogee Creek, by way of Oklahoma and Alabama,
Mhm.
and them having their practices, and also like European influences. So yeah, if you can
Yeah.
kind of touch on that, because it's the girls are real sensitive about that these
They
days.
really are, and I think the question back to and I don't spend too much time there, but it is the question I
Mhm.
get asked about the most. Um, and it makes me wonder what's at stake here? Why does it matter so much? Is it that folks are reacting to the way that, white folk, Hollywood has taken this tradition and perverted it, and they are like,
Mhm.
you all keep out, so it's sort of a gatekeeping? Is it that they believe in bloodline, in ancestral bloodlines, that if you don't have Black ancestors, you can't get close to this, which there might be something to that. So I actually wonder where that question is coming from.
Yeah,
I don't like policing of any sort, but
same.
in hoodoo, and this is where I would answer, well, which hoodoo are you talking about? Okay, because there's hoodoos. There's what
Talk about it.
Katrina Donald, Hazard Donald calls commodified market hoodoo, which is the kind that
Mhm.
ends up in the marketplace. You can go to a shop and, there's a lineage of that in the early 20th century. That's hoodoo too.
Yeah,
She says it's not real or authentic. I'm like, but if it's there, it's real. So I'm not, and I don't like to argue like that, because when a scholar says something, it means that, it's very proprietary. It's like, that's ours. But
yep,
the truth is, they took it, the white folk took it, some of the black folk took it, and they sold it and they marketed it, and it happened. Is that the hoodoo that they're talking about? Which to me looks a lot like a lot of this digital hoodoo. So
mhm,
I would say, well, which hoodoo is closed? Which one? The ones that says that you can't buy and sell, your candles online, because that's not
mhm,
closed. Is that your instincts are right? I think it's better
yeah,
to be agnostic about it and to ask, well, what's behind the question? Is it
yeah,
proprietary that this is ours? Again, spirit's gonna say, "No, it ain't yours." If
yeah,
anything, it's the African people. So, but I get asked that a lot, and I
mhm.
didn't get asked that a lot before. And then I'm like, I'm just like, "Mm."
Like, I don't know. Yeah, that's a little bit how I feel. I do think, yeah, because when you ask the question, like, okay, well, what's at stake? I do think there's some folks um that feel like there's this threat because of folks, non-black people asserting themselves in our spaces and black spaces, or when there is um like, for example, the Me Too movement. Because of my work in reproductive health as a doula and
Oh,
a charity, the Me Too movement, I knew the Me Too movement as a nonprofit and a movement was founded by a black woman.
yep, yep,
However, a
yep,
lot of people see it as this movement of
yep,
white women in Hollywood or white feminism.
yep,
So I do see
yep,
how with hoodoo a lot of people feel like, no, there's this constant threat of being co-opted,
yep,
of folks coming in and asserting themselves like, okay, well, let's start with us. And
yes,
then also the repackaging of hoodoo as if it's pretty, and yeah, selling this and
yep,
selling that.
yep,
And so I hear it, because I do see a lot of folks saying, well, no, it's closed based on, you need to be black, brown, indigenous, or having ancestors who practice. Or, yeah,
yeah,
so
yeah,
I
yeah.
do get it, because it's like, no, we need to have something of our own. So maybe it is a lot of the folks that feel like, there's this threat because we can't have nothing. Like, damn, we can't have nothing.
Yes, but you know what?
But
The easy way to settle that, I think, is that we have our ancestors. So
mhm,
if you view hoodoo as an ancestral tradition, um,
yes,
white people have ancestors and they have their kind of hoodoo. They have their
yeah,
hoodoo. But if
yeah,
you view African American hoodoo as an ancestral tradition, then it's closed. I don't even like that word.
yeah,
To people who have ancestors
mhm, mhm,
from Africa, and that
yeah,
includes, by the way, a lot of white folk. And
yeah,
that's why you
yeah,
can't you can't tell by looking at anyone anymore. So
yeah,
I would say, well, which hoodoo? The
mhm,
ancestral hoodoo, and no one can argue with that, because
yeah.
everyone has ancestors, So,
Yeah,
uh,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
Now, for my last question, I wanted to have a little fun. This has been so enlightening. This is like, it's just been so amazing talking to you, and I hope it's also okay for me to mention or ask you what you're working on
Oh,
right now, if you wanted to. But you
yeah.
don't have to
No,
say.
no,
You
no,
don't
no.
have to.
I will say it.
Okay,
I'm proud
okay.
of this. I'm proud of this. So I've been working on this project for 10 years, actually. So even,
Mhm,
but it's going to be my retirement book. Um, I'm a comic book geek. Uh, and I was born in the 20th century. So my question is, what does hoodoo, or what they call voodoo, look like in the comics? Very
mhm,
simple question. And when I ask people, they're like, I don't know. So I decided
mhm,
to write a book, looking at the comics that I love from the 1900s. What does hoodoo? Actually, they called it voodoo back then.
mhm,
What does voodoo look like in the comics world? And you'd be surprised at how many people can't answer that question. So I'm gonna
Right.
be the one to answer the question. It's comics, it's art, it's storytelling, it's it's not a beautiful story, but it's a powerful story. What does voodoo look like? Or what does I'll say hoodoo because people when they hear voodoo, they get nervous. What does that look
Mhm.
like in the comics world?
Mhm. I'm
And
so excited. The 10-year-old me is like, "Yes,
you're so
I wanna
funny. Yes.
I w I will like, I can't wait." And now that you know, I mean, I know you're still doing more projects with the school, but now that you're retired,
Yes,
you have more time to finish it and to have more fun.
I am having
Because
fun.
it
Yes.
sounds like you've been wanting to do this for some time, and I may have told you this on our intro call, but I think this is much needed, you know, like, because
Yeah.
we haven't had that type of representation, and it's like, what something more light towards the
Yes.
tradition, more
Yes.
light.
Yes, 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 and I again, we really need to know our history, especially before they whitewash it completely, so,
Mhm,
and I'm a
mhm.
historian, so I really love this, and history can be a beautiful thing, but
Yeah,
our best storytellers and historians are in our family, and we just sit with them, we sit with our
mhm.
ancestors, and we say, "Hey, what was that like?" And you'd be surprised, everyone has a different practice, the
Yes,
pictures that come, the memories of what your great-grandmother told you or it
yeah,
comes. That's how
yeah.
we tell our stories, and I find that to be a beautiful thing.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I cannot wait. I mean, take your time, but I do wanna encourage you to go ahead and finish that.
Oh, thank you so much, Chelsea. This is
Yes.
fun. This is wonderful.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. Best of luck to you,
Okay.
and happy early Hoodoo Heritage Month.
That's right. I can't wait.
Yeah.
I think they're gonna do something. I've gotten a lot of calls about the sinners, so I don't know if,
Okay.
but I hope that, more people and that's gonna be the question. "Can I take part in Hoodoo Heritage Month?" And you can either say, "No, that's ours," or you could say, "Come on in and learn." So, and
Yes.
I won't say which you should do, but yeah, I'm really looking
Yes.
forward to that. I'm looking forward
S
to it.
Same. Also an October baby. I'm October 2nd, so I kick it off.
Oh, this is great. Okay,
I
dear.
kick it
Alright.
off. No,
Yeah.
it's amazing. Thank you again. Thank you. Thank you
Okay.
so much. Okay, y'all, you've been listening to The Practice of a Hoodoo Baptist. Until next time, bye-bye.